You're a successful black woman, finally celebrating the biggest promotion of your career at an upscale bar. But instead of congratulations, you're met with racial profiling, corporate discrimination, and police intimidation. What these officers and entitled patrons didn't know, they just threatened the newly appointed FBI commissioner. What happens next will restore your faith in justice and prove that karma has perfect timing. This is a story about prejudice, power, and the ultimate comeback that no one saw coming. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice served cold, smash that like button if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their appearance. And subscribe to Charpy Stories for more tales of underdogs triumphing over discrimination and prejudice. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Black woman threatened by cops at bar. Unaware she's the new FBI commissioner. Dr. Angela Morrison had spent 23 years climbing the ladder in federal law enforcement. From her days as a rookie FBI agent facing skepticism and outright hostility from colleagues who questioned whether a young black woman belonged in their ranks, to becoming the youngest deputy director in bureau history, she had weathered every storm with grace and determination. At 47, Angela possessed the kind of quiet confidence that came from proving herself 1,000 times over. Her track record spoke volumes. She had led the task force that dismantled 3 major organized crime syndicates, spearheaded anti-terrorism operations that saved countless lives, and mentored dozens of agents who now held leadership positions across the country. Today, however, was different. Today, she was no longer Deputy Director Morrison. 3 hours ago, in a private ceremony at the White House, she had been sworn in as the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the first black woman to ever hold the position in the agency's 115-year history. The weight of that achievement hadn't fully settled in yet. After the ceremonial handshakes and photo opportunities, Angela had quietly slipped away from the official reception. She needed a moment to process this monumental milestone, somewhere away from the political spotlight and media attention. That's how she found herself at the Metropolitan Club, an upscale establishment in downtown Washington, D.C., known for attracting government officials, corporate executives, and the city's professional elite. Angela chose a corner table in the dimly lit lounge, ordering a glass of Macallan 18, a small indulgence she'd been saving for this exact moment. She had dressed down for the occasion, trading her formal ceremony attire for dark jeans, a simple black blazer, and comfortable flats. After decades of power suits and official protocols, she wanted to celebrate her achievement as simply Angela, not as a government official surrounded by security details and handlers. The irony wasn't lost on her that even in this moment of triumph, she found herself hyper-aware of the stares from other patrons. The Metropolitan Club's clientele was predominantly white and wealthy, and despite the establishment's supposed sophistication, Angela noticed the subtle double takes and lingering glances that had followed her throughout her career. She was halfway through her whiskey, scrolling through congratulatory messages on her personal phone, when she overheard the conversation at the nearby table. "I'm telling you, Marcus, this diversity hire nonsense is getting out of hand," said a man in his 50s, his voice carrying the entitled tone of someone accustomed to being heard. "They announced the new FBI director today, some black woman. Can you believe it? The Bureau used to mean something." His companion, equally well-dressed and equally dismissive, shook his head in disgust. "It's all political theater, Brad. They don't care about qualifications anymore, just checking boxes. I guarantee she's not qualified for the position. Probably slept her way to the top, or played the race card every step of the way." Angela's grip tightened on her glass. 23 years of exemplary service, multiple commendations, a doctorate in criminal justice, and a master's degree in international security, reduced to assumptions about diversity, hiring, and sexual impropriety. She had learned long ago to pick her battles. Confronting every ignorant comment would leave no energy for the real work. But tonight, on the most important day of her professional life, their words stung deeper than usual. The situation escalated when Brad noticed her listening. "Hey you," he called out, his voice loud enough to draw attention from surrounding tables. "You got a problem?" Angela looked up calmly. "Excuse me. You've been staring over here for the past 5 minutes. Something you want to say?" Before Angela could respond, Marcus joined in. "Brad, look at her. She's probably one of those angry activists who thinks everything is racist. Probably doesn't even belong in a place like this. The casual cruelty in their voices was familiar, but it never stopped being painful. Angela had endured similar treatment in FBI training academies, in federal courtrooms, and in high-level briefings where she was often the only person of color in the room. "Gentlemen," Angela said evenly, "I'm just trying to enjoy my drink in peace." "Peace?" Brad laughed, his voice dripping with disdain. "You want peace? Maybe you should find a bar more suited to your demographic. This is a respectable establishment for professionals." The bartender, a young black man named Trevor who had been watching the exchange with growing concern, approached their section. Angela could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to defend her warring with the need to keep his job. "Is everything okay here?" Trevor asked diplomatically. "Everything's fine," Marcus replied curtly. "Just having a conversation with our friend here about appropriate venue selection." Angela finished her whiskey and stood to leave, determined not to let these men ruin her moment. But as she walked toward the exit, Brad's voice followed her. "See, Marcus, they never want to actually engage in real discussion. Just throw around accusations and play victim." That's when Angela made a mistake. She turned around. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of federal agents, "I do engage in real discussion. I've spent my career engaging in discussions about national security, international terrorism, and organized crime. But I don't debate my right to exist in public spaces with people who've already decided my worth based on my appearance." The exchange had drawn attention from across the lounge. Several patrons were openly staring now, their expressions ranging from curious to uncomfortable. Brad stood up, his face flushed with alcohol and indignation. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Let me guess, government job? Affirmative action hire? Probably think you're entitled to lecture your betters about how the world works." "Brad," Marcus warned, perhaps sensing the situation was escalating beyond casual bigotry. But Brad was on a roll. "No, I want to hear this. Miss High and Mighty wants to educate us about discussions. Let's discuss how people like her are destroying institutions that took generations to build. Let's discuss how merit doesn't matter anymore, just skin color and gender." Angela felt the familiar weight of representing her entire race in the eyes of watching strangers. Every response would be scrutinized, every word measured against stereotypes about angry black women or uppity minorities who didn't know their place. "You don't know anything about me," she said simply. "I know enough," Brad replied. "I know your type. Always complaining, always blaming others for your problems, always playing the victim card when called out." That's when Trevor made his own mistake. He stepped between them. "Sir, please lower your voice. You're disturbing other customers." Brad turned his fury toward the young bartender. "Don't tell me what to do, boy. You're just help. Stay in your lane." The racial slur hung in the air like smoke. Several patrons gasped audibly. Angela watched Trevor's shoulders stiffen, recognizing the moment she knew too well, when dignity collided with economic necessity. "Actually," Angela said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "he's not help. He's a professional doing his job. And you're a drunk businessman who thinks his wallet gives him the right to abuse service workers and customers alike." Brad whirled back toward her. "Lady, you have no idea who you're talking to. I own 3 companies. I employ hundreds of people. I contribute more to this economy than you ever will." "Money doesn't make you decent," Angela replied. "It just makes you a wealthy bigot." The insult hit its mark. Brad's face turned purple with rage. "You know what? I'm done with this conversation. Security." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need police at the Metropolitan Club immediately. There's a disorderly person here threatening customers. Black female, aggressive, possibly intoxicated." Angela's blood ran cold. She knew how this scenario typically played out. Police would arrive already primed to see her as the threat. Her word against his wouldn't matter. His expensive suit and white skin would carry more credibility than her professional accomplishments or calm demeanor. "Sir, that's not necessary," Trevor said desperately. "No one's being disorderly." "Don't tell me what's necessary," Brad snapped. "I pay taxes. I deserve to feel safe in establishments like this." Within minutes, 2 officers arrived. Angela recognized the type immediately. The swagger of men who saw themselves as warriors in a civilian world. The subtle positioning that made it clear they'd already decided who the problem was before hearing any testimony. Officer Richards was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the aggressive confidence of someone who expected immediate compliance. His partner, Officer Chun, seemed younger and less certain, but equally prepared to follow his lead. "All right, what's the situation here?" Richards asked, directing his attention immediately to Brad. "Thank God you're here," Brad said, his voice suddenly reasonable and concerned. "This woman has been harassing my friend and me all evening. She's been making inflammatory comments, using racial language, and when we asked her to leave us alone, she became belligerent. Then she started threatening the staff." Angela listened to the lies with practiced calm, but her heart was racing. She had investigated dozens of cases where situations like this had ended in tragedy. The words of well-dressed white men carried weight that her federal credentials might not be able to overcome. "Ma'am, is this true?" Richards asked, his hand already resting on his belt. "No, it's not," Angela replied evenly. "These gentlemen were making racist comments about the new FBI director. When I objected to their language, they escalated the situation." Richards and Chin exchanged a look. Angela could practically read their thoughts. Another uppity minority claiming racism when confronted about bad behavior. "Sir," Richards said to Brad, "do you want to press charges for harassment?" "I just want to feel safe," Brad replied with practiced victim theatrics. "She's clearly unstable. I'm concerned about what she might do next." Angela felt the familiar surge of helpless rage that came with being criminalized for existing while black. But beneath the anger was something else, a cold calculation born from years of federal law enforcement training. "Officers," she said carefully, "I'm going to reach into my jacket pocket very slowly to show you my identification. Keep your hands where I can see them," Richards ordered, his voice sharpening with suspicion. Angela moved with deliberate slowness, maintaining eye contact as she retrieved her federal credentials. The badge and ID card that identified her as Director Angela Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Richards took the credentials, examined them briefly, then looked up at Angela with confusion. Chin peered over his partner's shoulder, his eyes widening as he read the identification. "This some kind of joke?" Richards asked suspiciously. "No joke," Angela replied. "I was sworn in 3 hours ago. The ceremony was at the White House. You can verify with FBI headquarters if necessary." The color drained from Brad's face as he realized what he was seeing. Marcus had gone completely silent, staring at the credentials in Richards' hands like they might explode. "Ma'am," Chin said nervously, "we're going to need to verify this identification." "Of course," Angela replied. "My direct number is on the card. You can also reach my assistant director or call the main FBI switchboard and ask for verification of my appointment." Richards made the call, stepping away from the group while speaking in hushed tones to someone at FBI headquarters. Angela watched Brad's mounting panic with detached interest. The man who had called her unqualified was now staring at someone who had just become one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. When Richards returned, his entire demeanor had changed. The swagger was gone, replaced by the careful deference of someone who had just realized he was talking to a federal director. "Director Morrison," he said formally, "I apologize for the confusion. We verified your identification with FBI headquarters. Is there anything we can do for you?" Angela looked at Brad, who was now sweating despite the air conditioning. Marcus had moved several steps away from his companion, clearly trying to distance himself from the situation. "Actually, yes," Angela said thoughtfully. "I'd like to discuss this gentleman's emergency call. Making false reports to police is a crime, as I'm sure you know. But more concerning to me is his apparent belief that he can weaponize law enforcement against citizens based on their race." "Now wait a minute," Brad started. "You called 911 and reported that I was threatening customers and possibly intoxicated," Angela continued. "You described me as aggressive and disorderly when I was sitting quietly at my table drinking whiskey and checking messages. You lied to officers about my behavior and tried to have me arrested for the crime of objecting to your racist commentary." Richards looked between Angela and Brad, clearly recognizing that the situation had shifted dramatically. "Sir," he said to Brad, "is this accurate? Did you make false statements in your emergency call?" I I was concerned for my safety, Brad stammered. She was acting threatening. How exactly was I threatening? Angela asked. By stating that money doesn't make someone decent? By pointing out that calling a bartender boy is inappropriate? Which part of that made you fear for your safety? Trevor, who had been watching the exchange in amazement, stepped forward. Officers, I was here for the entire incident. The gentleman made racist comments about the FBI director, not knowing she was sitting right there. When Director Morrison responded calmly, he escalated the situation and called her several inappropriate names. She never raised her voice or made any threatening gestures. Several other patrons nodded in agreement. Angela noticed that the same people who had been staring uncomfortably during the confrontation were now eager to support her version of events. Director Morrison, Richard said carefully, "Would you like to pursue charges for filing a false police report?" Angela considered the question. She could destroy Brad's life with a phone call. His companies would face federal investigation. His social circle would abandon him. His career would effectively end. But that wasn't who she was. That wasn't the kind of leader she intended to be. No charges, she said finally. But I do want this incident documented. And I want these gentlemen to understand something important. She turned to face Brad directly, her voice carrying the authority of her new position. You spent this evening questioning my qualifications, assuming I was undeserving of my achievements, and trying to have me arrested for defending myself against your bigotry. You called me an affirmative action hire and suggested I had compromised my integrity to advance my career. You were so convinced of your own superiority that you couldn't imagine a black woman might actually be more accomplished than you. Brad couldn't meet her eyes. Here's what you're going to learn, Angela continued. I graduated summa cum laude from Howard University. I earned my law degree from Yale. I have a doctorate in criminal justice and a master's degree in international security. I've served this country for 23 years, leading investigations that have saved American lives and dismantled criminal organizations. I've been shot at, threatened, and subjected to discrimination throughout my career, but I never stopped doing my job with excellence. The lounge had gone completely quiet. Everyone was listening to her words. Today, I became the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation because I was the most qualified candidate for the position. Not because of my race or gender, but despite the obstacles those factors created. And tomorrow, I'll start my new job leading an organization of 35,000 employees dedicated to protecting this nation. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. You try to criminalize me for existing while black in a space you deemed inappropriate for people like me. You weaponized law enforcement against a citizen whose only crime was challenging your prejudice. And you did it all while talking to the person who now leads the premier federal law enforcement agency in the world. Brad looked physically ill. The next time you encounter someone who doesn't look like you in a space you think they don't belong, remember this moment. Remember that you have no idea who you're talking to or what they've accomplished. Remember that your assumptions about people's qualifications and character are based on your own limitations, not theirs. Angela retrieved her credentials from Richards and placed them back in her jacket pocket. Officers, thank you for your professionalism once the situation became clear. I trust this incident will serve as a learning opportunity for everyone involved. She turned to Trevor. Thank you for standing up when it mattered. That took courage. Finally, she looked back at Brad one last time. Mr. Stevens, he whispered. Brad Stevens. Mr. Stevens, I hope someday you realize that the strength of our institutions comes from the diversity of people committed to serving them with excellence. The FBI is stronger today, not despite my appointment, but because of what I bring to the role. With that, Angela walked toward the exit. The lounge remained silent until she was gone, leaving behind a room full of people reconsidering their assumptions about power, privilege, and the dangers of judging others by appearance. Outside, Angela called her driver and stood in the cool evening air, finally allowing herself to smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, congressional hearings, budget meetings, and the enormous responsibility of leading the Bureau through complex national security threats. But tonight, she had reminded herself why representation mattered. Somewhere, a young black girl might hear this story and realize that no door was permanently closed to her. Somewhere, a law enforcement officer might think twice before making assumptions about citizens based on their appearance. And somewhere, People like Brad Stevens might learn that respect isn't earned through wealth or status, but through character and service to others. Angela's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant director. "Ma'am, there are 3 major cases waiting for your review first thing tomorrow morning. Welcome to the big leagues." She typed back, "I've been in the big leagues my whole career. Tomorrow, we just make it official." As her car arrived, Angela reflected on the evening's events. She had spent decades proving herself worthy of respect and recognition. Tonight, she had finally reached a position where she could command both. But more importantly, she had used that moment not for revenge, but for education. That, she realized, was what true power looked like. This story reminds us that respect should never have to be earned through titles or positions. It should be given freely to all people regardless of their appearance or background. Angela Morrison didn't deserve different treatment because she was an FBI director. She deserved respect because she was a human being. Too often, people make assumptions about others based on race, gender, or age, never realizing that the person they're dismissing might be far more accomplished than they could imagine. The next time you encounter someone in a space where you think they don't belong, ask yourself, what do I really know about this person, and why do I think I have a right to judge their qualifications or presence? Power isn't about using your position to destroy those who wrong you. It's about using your influence to create teaching moments that make the world a little more just. Angela could have ended Brad Stevens' career, but instead, she chose to educate him and everyone watching about the dangers of prejudice and assumption. The most profound victories aren't always about revenge. Sometimes they're about changing hearts and minds, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. Remember, everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about and carrying achievements you can't see. Treat them accordingly.